Hi, everybody. Today we are going to continue our lesson on animal behavior, and we're going to focus on learned behavior. So one of the things we're going to be learning about is associative learning, which is learning to associate a stimulus with a consequence. So this is sometimes called operant conditioning or trial and error learning. So a good example of this is going to be birds. Birds that eat monarch butterflies. Monarch butterflies are distasteful, and they have a very distinctive color pattern. So birds remember the first time they eat a monarch butterfly, it's very distasteful, and they learn to associate that color pattern with the distasteful nature of the monarch. Now, you may remember from ecology that the viceroy butterfly has a similar color pattern, but isn't distasteful. And you may remember that's Batesian mimicry. Here is a coyote that's been stung by a porcupine. So that's operant conditioning. It's going to learn to stay away from that animal. And so we're associating a behavior with either a reward or a punishment. So learning what to eat or what not to eat. So here is operant conditioning, a Skinner box. Basically, a rat is being taught that when it pushes a lever, it gets food. So the rat pushes the lever, and then food comes out of this pellet dispenser. So it learns to associate pushing the lever with getting food. All right. And that was B.F. Skinner that studied operant conditioning. Now, classical conditioning is a little bit different. This is when there's an association made between two different kinds of stimuli. So our classic example of classical conditioning is Pavlov's dogs. They learn to associate the sound of a bell with the unrelated stimulus of meat powder, right? There's no inherent relationship between a bell and meat. So the sound of the bell could produce the response of salivation. So here we have before conditioning, right? The dog was given food, and the response was salivation, not salvation, salivation. So the dog produced saliva when it was shown food. Then we had the bell, right? The dog had no salivatory response, right? So no salivation with the bell. That should make sense. Why would a dog salivate when a bell is rung? So what then Pavlov did is he associated the bell and the food together. So when he provided the dogs with food, he also rang a bell. And so the dogs salivated until he then just rang the bell without the food. And in the dog's head, it associated that sound, that unrelated sound of the bell with the food. And you got a salivatory response. All right. Another learned behavior is habituation, and this is like the cry wolf effect, or the getting like kind of like the word habit in habituation. It's getting used to something. So a decreased response due to repeated occurrences of a stimulus. And this basically enables the animals to disregard unimportant stimuli. So, for example, baby birds, they're going to be in fear of what's above them, right? Because there could be a predatory bird swooping down to get them. But falling leaves are something that's not a danger, right? But falling leaves are going to result in that response of the birds to look up. What's that? So after time, habituation takes in, and the birds learn to ignore the falling leaves. But that doesn't mean they ignore everything that's above them. They just sort of learn what the falling leaves look like. Here we see crows that have learned not to be scared of the scarecrow. So the scarecrow might work for a little bit, but the crows, which are very smart birds, learn that it's not actually a danger. All right. Insight, cognition, and problem solving. So cognition is the process of knowing that may include awareness, reasoning, recollection, and judgment. For example, honeybees can distinguish same from different. So if we give our honeybees a choice chamber, we can actually teach the honeybees to follow the same pattern through the maze to find the food. So the bee knows the same, okay, blue, and then it's with a choice, it's got to follow blue to the food. You can remake this maze and it will learn to follow the blue path to the food. And the same thing can be done with patterns like horizontal versus vertical stripes. So really some pretty amazing learned behavior in honeybees. Problem solving, tool usage can be a way of solving a problem. Chimpanzees can use sticks. Sea otters can use a rock to crack open mollusks. Here we have a chimpanzee. It wants to reach the food that's hanging from the ceiling. It can't reach it. It can learn to stack boxes and climb on the boxes to reach the food. That's pretty amazing that an animal can problem like that. Crows, as I mentioned before, crows are very smart animals. The crows can learn to get the food by pulling up the string, which may not seem that exciting, but it's actually a pretty amazing thing that an animal can figure out how to pull up a string to get the food, right? That's a few steps, more steps than most animals can do. So problem solving is the process of devising a strategy to overcome an obstacle, such as the stacking boxes example. Some animals learn to solve problems by observing other animals, like young chimpanzees. They learn to crack palm nuts with stones, heavy stones. It has to be the right size, and they do that by copying older chimpanzees that show them what to do. Other behaviors. So some of these behaviors, we went over this at the beginning of the year, if you remember the pill bug lab that we didn't quite get to do, but we did sort of look at when we had those first 2 weeks of e-learning. We have a more innate behavior. So taxis is a change in direction. So this is an automatic movement in response toward or away from a stimulus. Like a taxi will take you directly somewhere. Animals can move to food or away from a predator. Phototaxis moving towards or from light. Chemotaxis moving towards or from a chemical. And then we have kinesis. Oh, here we have a salmon, a fish, moving against the river current. Kinesis is random movement that's going to change the rate of movement, but it's not going to be in a particular direction. So you might see kinesis if you turn over a rock and suddenly these insects are exposed to light and they just start moving in any direction because the goal is to get out of the light. So by moving in any direction, they are more likely to end up in a spot that doesn't have light. So this would be kinesis, not a direct path. Many animals that communicate through odors emit a substance called pheromones. So pheromones are chemicals that stimulate a response from other individuals, like we saw with chemotaxis. This picture is a little messed up for some reason. Alarm pheromones can act as a warning. Sex pheromones can be used to attract potential mates. None of those are working. But pheromones can direct behavior of other animals. Pheromones are effective at very low concentrations, so the animals don't have to make a lot of them. And the advantage is that they are species specific. So predators might not detect pheromones, but the other animals of the same species will. So they could let off an alarm signal without attracting other predators to the area. Pheromones can be used to mark territory. They can be used to lure prey, as the spider is doing. Female mosquitoes use carbon dioxide concentrations to locate victims. Not exactly a pheromone, but it's the same idea. This is how mosquitoes are attracted to us in the summer. They can track the CO2 that we emit from breathing. All right, and we are going to stop there. That was learned behaviors.